Good
Recording.
evening. Thanks, Shane, for getting that started. I see it's just one in attendance right now. We'll give it just another minute or so, let anyone else that wants to join, and then we'll jump in and get this started. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. It's 5:02, and then anyone else that wants to join up can join up. They'll have plenty of time. This is um, should be about an hour's presentation. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Scott Soers. I'm a senior environmental scientist, and I supervise the environmental compliance unit with the Off-Highway Motor Vehicle Recreation Division. This evening's presentation is an exciting and important milestone for the Hollister Hills State Vehicular Recreation Area, or SVRA, and the OHMVR division as it makes another step forward in our progress towards meeting full compliance with the updated environmental requirements from Senate Bill 249, which passed in 2017. The purpose of our presentation this evening is to introduce to the public the Hollister Hills Wildlife Habitat Protection Plan, or WHIP, you'll hear us refer to it. We'll be recording tonight's presentation and posting it later on YouTube, and we will distribute that link as necessary. Additionally, we intend for this evening's presentation to be informative, and we would love to answer questions. You can make comment, but we will not be responding to comment, if that makes sense. We'll just be taking questions, and any comments that are made on the document, we will note it for our record and follow up accordingly. I wanted to speak on behalf of our entire team. We have a bunch of people behind the scene right now that are helping put this on. We have Hollister Hills staff with us today. And for everyone that's out there watching, thank you for your interest in our presentation, and we look forward to your feedback. Next slide, please. Really brief overview of our presentation. It'll take place in two parts. First, I'll be providing some background information for the WHIP, starting with a brief discussion of the WHIP requirements, both past and present. We will then discuss Senate Bill 249 and the changes it made to the OHMVR division and to the department as a whole. I will then cover the division's process for updating and developing the WHIPs. I'll briefly touch on the details of our public review period, which we're kicking off right now at this meeting. And then finally, I'll cover our progress to date. Following my slides, I will turn the presentation over to Wes Gray, Natural Resource Manager at Hollister Hills, and Akiko Masuda, who is the primary author of the WHIP, and they will take you through the document. Next slide. So I wanted to just quickly take us back in time. Starting at the highest level, it's important to understand that the requirement of the Wildlife Habitat Protection Plan kind of came into being and how it's changed recently. So nearly 4 decades ago, California's legislature passed Senate Bill 877, which introduced the requirement to draft a wildlife habitat protection plan. And the important part was that this plan was to sustain a viable species composition at SVRAs. The same requirement was reiterated in Senate Bill 742 in 2007. And so I highlight this to really point out that the requirement for SVRAs to have a wildlife habitat protection plan is not new. These requirements have been around since the program's inception, or nearly since its inception, so about 40 years. So in 2017, Senate Bill 249 revised portions of the Public Resources Code, and one of the revisions required that SVRAs draft a wildlife habitat protection plan that instead conserves and improves wildlife habitat, and that's an important distinction. So this change in emphasis, among other statute amendments, prompted the need to update the SVRA WHIPs in their entirety, we needed to bring them up to the new standards from Senate Bill 249. We'll be taking a deeper look at some of the specific requirements in the WHP shortly. Next slide. Senate Bill 249, roles and responsibilities. This statute or this legislation made several changes and additions to specific requirements and clarified roles for both the division and the department. So first, Senate Bill 249 broadly aligns the OHMVR division within the department to ensure consistency with the transformation effort that was ongoing at the time of this legislation. And for those who may be less familiar, the transformation effort was a department-wide effort to modernize and restructure the way that California State Parks does business. So it was a large-scale effort to rethink how we were doing things within state parks. So through transformation, one of the outcomes of that was that the SVRAs began reporting through what we call the district chain of command. So slight change there. Next, Senate Bill 249 requires that the OHMVR division prepare and implement WHPs at the SVRAs. Even though we've already had them, this was remaining language that if you are an SVRA, thou shalt have a WHP. Additional considerations that were added into statute was that the division was to ensure that monitoring for WHP compliance is occurring annually. The division was also required to compile an inventory of native plant communities. And then finally, the SB 249 requires that WHPs and annual reports that are generated as a result of the WHP be posted on the division's webpage. Senate Bill 249 also references the department in many of the updated statutes. And so given that the WHPs really focus on natural resources, to fulfill the role of the department within statute, the OHMVR division works closely with our colleagues over in the Natural Resources Division of State Parks. That side of state parks fulfills the roles of the department in statute. Among other requirements, Senate Bill 249 tasks the Natural Resources Division with ensuring that the WHPs apply a phrase that we call best available science, and that WHPs provide opportunities for public comment. Next slide. So taking a little deeper into this, some of the specific requirements that are related to the WHP specifically. So one of the things that the legislation prioritized was that WHPs should fit within the greater context of regional conservation efforts. And so each WHP must be developed in consideration of state and regional conservation objectives. This helps the WHP make sure that it's relevant in other conservation-oriented programs in the greater area that surrounds the park. This could be anything from land management objectives, conservation plans, etc. Next, the overarching goal of each WHP is to conserve and improve habitat. The WHPs accomplish this by broadly defining conservation and improvement goals and creating more specific objectives to reach these goals. Next, each WHP must also contain an updated wildlife inventory, along with an inventory of native plant communities. SVRA staff draw upon resources such as the California Natural Diversity Database from the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and from the last decade or so of wildlife monitoring performed at each SVRA to compile this wildlife inventory. Additionally, we will hear how the SVRAs, with the help of Natural Resources Division staff, implemented CDFW's veg camp monitoring protocols to compile and map vegetation communities at each SVRA. And again, for those less familiar, veg camp is the California standard for mapping vegetation throughout our state. These maps have been incorporated into every WHP and help the SVRA staff craft well-informed objectives. Next, each WHP must describe the monitoring that will be used to ensure the efficacy of management actions being implemented at the SVRA. The monitoring results drive the adaptive management feedback loop. And finally, each WHP must apply the principles of best available science throughout its development, which goes beyond just picking specific monitoring methodology. This requirement is intended to raise the rigor in which these plans are prepared. The Natural Resources Division developed a helpful guide for the SVRAs. It was the Best Available Science Guidelines. And this is used throughout the Department of Parks and Recreation, not just for the SVRAs, but the SVRAs can utilize this. And it helps ensure that there's a defined standard for our SVRAs to apply this best available science. The objective of the guidelines is to ensure that the natural resources related work that the department engages in is carried out in an informed, transparent, and adaptive manner that allows learning and anticipates changing conditions. Finally, each WHIP must provide opportunities for public comment. Today's presentation is part of our effort to ensure that we reach as broad of an audience as we can and also help inform the public about our planning and about the work that we intend to do at the park. Next slide. All right, just talked a lot about the background, so let's really talk about what's in a WHIP. Each SVRA WHIP is written to capture the entirety of the SVRA's resource management program. SVRA staff write each WHIP to contain the following sections that you see on the screen here. All WHIPs are grounded in what we would refer to as the adaptive management framework. The primary components of each WHIP include a natural resources assessment, in which, as I'd mentioned previously, we and the SVRA staff utilize past monitoring data, perform desktop research, utilize the results of veg camp monitoring, and then to that we craft resource management goals and objectives. The intent behind these goals and objectives are to conserve and improve habitats as we've been directed to do so. These goals and objectives also apply the concepts of best available science, consider regional and state conservation objectives, and really try to move the needle as far as the efforts that we're putting down on the ground to ensure that our resources are protected. Next, the WHIP describes management actions that are being implemented or that are planned to be implemented. And this basically is just a discussion on what the SVRA will do to meet certain objectives. And then finally, there's a monitoring program which describes how the SVRA staff will monitor the success or the efficacy of the objectives, and whether or not they are being met. Next slide. So realistically, what I wanted to leave the understanding with is that the WHIPs are it's a document that captures the breadth of the SVRA's resource management program, but it's also used as a tool to ensure that places as beautiful as Hollister Hills, as you see on the screen here, remain that way. It's a way to protect what's important in the values of the park. So looking kind of at our development process, so how we got here, after Senate Bill 249 was passed, the division and the Natural Resources Division began meeting with SVRA staff to build out what internally we called the WHIP framework. And you could think of the WHIP framework as it was the divisions, it was a collaboration on the interpretation of statute, and was developed to build out a set of guiding principles and theories to follow as far as building out each SVRA's WHIP. So with the framework completed, headquarters staff began meeting with the SVRA staff to develop and draft wildlife habitat protection plans. And our process for that is that there are multiple review steps in between the initial draft, a complete draft, and then a final draft. We have several internal steps, from just small working groups to then greater peer reviews from across the department, and at the district level. And then finally, we take the document public. And we are doing that for a 30-day public comment period where it's posted online. The public can read, review, and make comment on the documents. Following the public comment period, any changes, we will implement any changes that we find necessary. The WHIP is then finalized. It's reviewed by the Natural Resources Division and given a best available science determination. And then following that, the final step is for the OHMVR division to approve the WHIP. Then the SVRA can begin implementing its new WHIP. On the tail end of this effort, annual reports are generated and submitted to headquarters staff for review. These reports will be posted on the department's webpage. And finally, these documents are really looked at as a living document and meant to be reviewed annually, but at a very minimum, we'll be updating these WHPs every 5 years. Next slide. So our public review process, I kind of really quickly grazed over it, but now we're going to take a little deeper look at it. So 2 weeks ahead of the meetings that we're giving right now, our presentation, we'll announce the presentation. The day of the presentation, we send the whip out to interested parties. We post it on social media. We try to really cast a broad net so people are aware of what we're doing. We have 30 days for the public to review and provide comment on the draft. There's an email on the screen here, ohmvr.envcomp@parks.ca.gov. Please submit any written comments to that email. And it's opening today, August 19th, and closing September 18th. So if you do intend to submit comments, please get them in before September 18th. Ultimately, we use the comments that we receive and the feedback that we receive. We log those into a comment log. We review them. We respond to them internally, and try to see if we can incorporate the feedback into the document if it makes sense to do so. Next slide, please. Our progress to date, just very briefly, in 2022, we finalized Prairie City, Heber Dunes, and Clay Pit WHPs, and they are already currently implementing those WHPs and submitting annual reports. In 2024, we anticipate finalizing Hollister Hills. We just had Hungry Valley's comment period earlier in June. We also anticipate Oceano Dunes. We plan on bringing that public later this fall. And then we also intend to have Onyx Ranch completed by the end of this year as well. So that leaves in 2025 to finalize Ocotillo Wells and Carnegie SVRAs. Next slide. And then that's kind of wrapping up my portion of this presentation here, but I did want to acknowledge our staff and our colleagues with the Natural Resources Division, specifically Leah Gardner and Melissa Patton, who did a lot of the legwork in the veg camp mapping process. This was an exhaustive effort, and so my hat's off to them for sure. Also wanted to recognize my team at Division for helping put this on today and for their work on the slides, but ultimately I wanted to thank the SVRA staff and the leadership at the district there for their support in this endeavor. It's a lot of staff time that goes towards building out this document, and so my hat's off to you for the diligence and the efforts that you've put in supporting your staff. Next slide, please. So with that, I will stop and I will turn the presentation over to Wes Gray, Natural Resource Manager and wearer of several other hats at Hollister Hills currently. Wes, thank you. I will turn the presentation over to you.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, so as Scott said, I've been working for state parks for over 20 years. I started in 2004. My first job at Hollister Hills was in 2010 as an environmental scientist. I spent many years in the field kind of setting up some of these initial monitoring programs, some of which have been running ever since. So we're kind of up to over 10 years of some of the programs that we started back then. And I started as the Natural Resource Manager in 2019 at the start of the creation of the Diablo Range District. And I've been an out-of-class sector manager for the last year and a half. And I want to welcome everyone to the Hollister Hills WHP presentation. So now we'll be talking about from the district point of view. And thanks everyone for joining. I'm looking at the attendance list and I recognize a lot of names, so it's a very friendly crowd. So let's jump on in. So this is how we're kind of breaking it up. We're going to start off with the introduction to Hollister Hills, kind of talk about where the park is located and what is contained within the parks and a little bit about the history. Then I'm gonna pass it over to Akiko. She will talk about the natural resource assessments, the WHP goals and objectives, and then she will pass it back to me and we'll wrap it up with the evaluation and adaptive plans and the next steps for this document. So as I mentioned, Hollister Hills is part of the Diablo Range District. It's a little history lesson, or inside state parks. California State Parks is made up of over 280 units. There are 21 districts, And ours is Diablo Range District, which was created in 2008-9 in the department's latest reorg. And it's a fairly large district that's spread out. Our northernmost unit is Lock Boarding House in Sacramento County, and our southernmost is Hollister Hills in San Benito County. So you can see in this map, we're spread out. Our district office is in Carnegie SVRA, our other OHV unit. It's kind of centrally located. And the kind of main big units in our district are Mount Diablo, Carnegie, Henrico, and Hollister. And so Hollister Hills, which we're talking about today, is located about 8 miles south of the city of Hollister and is about 6,600 acres. It's in San Benito County, and its surrounding area is mostly grazed rangeland. But on the north side, there is a neighborhood called Hidden Valley that is made up of low-density, multi-acre rural housing. And in the south, there are some vineyards, wineries, and rock quarries. And then a little brief history of Hollister Hills. So the land that makes up the park is inhabited by humans for thousands of years. The first tribes were the Ohlone Native Americans, and the Alma Mutsun is the name of the local tribe in our area. And then skipping through a lot of history into the modern area, in 1970, Howard Harris, he was a private individual. He opened up his ranch at the time and called it the Hollister Hills Motorcycle Playground, which was a public, privately owned motorcycle park. And he had a geology background and was a pretty very intelligent guy. And he set up a lot of the roads and trails that make up the core of what is now Hollister Hills. So he has a big part in how Hollister Hills came to be. And then the state of California purchased the land from him in 1975 to make one of the first state vehicle recreation areas. It's right behind Oceano Dunes. They're the first, but right behind them, one of the first units. And we've been operating ever since. The Hollister Hills Off-Road Association, commonly referred to as HORA, was established in 1983, and they are our state parks partner, and they are a cooperating association that is designated to support our educational and interpretive activities. Some other significant events were in 89 and 93, the park purchased the Wrens and Hudner Ranch and added it into the SVRA, which effectively doubled in size. We went from 3,000 to 6,000 acres. So it was a significant event and made a big change in how the park is operated today. And the park celebrated its 40th anniversary in 2015 and was designated a point of historical interest in 2022. The Hollister Hills, like I said, is 6,600 acres. It's broken up into 7 different management units. And what plays a big part in the management units is the San Andreas Fault. So there's 2 different plates that have very different soil types. So to the north of the San Andreas Fault, it is a granitic or a adobe clay based soil, which has very small particles and is very different to recreate on it. It compacts really well. It's not as dusty in the summertime, but when it rains and gets fully saturated, it just becomes extremely sticky and slippery, and we have to close the area in wet weather. But on the south side of the San Andreas Fault, it is granitic soil, which is much larger particles that drain very well, which is ideal for recreation when it's wet weather, as it reduces the dust. It can get pretty dusty in the granitic side in the summertime, but the granitic side is open year round. So Hollister Hills is opened 365 all year round, at least parts of it, regardless of the weather. And so the management units, we also break up for our recreational type. And I'll get into that a little bit more, but essentially we have the lower ranch and Wrens for dirt bikes and ATVs, and Hudner and upper ranch for ROVs and 4x4s. And then the non-motorized buffer and the nature area are both non-motorized areas, but there is hiking, biking, and equestrian use in parts of it. So the lower ranch and the Wrens, which is the dirt bike and ATV area, it's the main core of the park. It has over 150 miles of roads and trails. They're primarily all single directional, which is very important for safety and makes it a family-friendly environment where, you can never guarantee, but for the most part, people are traveling the same direction. So you're not having as much people, head-ons come in the same direction that you're going. It also contains some large campgrounds and day use facilities that have flush toilets and hot showers and pretty good amenities for an OHV park. And also contains our concession store called Fault Line, which provides a good service to the public. It sells food, camping supplies, and motorcycle gear and safety gear. The other side is the Upper Ranch and Hudner Ranch. These are for 4x4 and ROVs. They're split by the fault. So the Hudner is the adobe clay soil, and the Upper Ranch is the granitic area. The Upper Ranch also contains two special event areas: the GP or Grand Prix track, which is a motocross track that has special events throughout the year. And the Area 5 group camp, which is very popular for clubs to rent out and have very special events throughout the year. And then lastly, the non-OHV management units are the nature area and the Mudstone Ranch, which is our non-motorized trail system, but it's open to mountain biking, hiking, and equestrian horse use. So we have different recreation types for all different groups, and it's one of our newer areas that's been open to the public, and it's been very popular, and the local community likes it because there are very few other outdoor publicly owned spaces in San Bernardino County. So it's been a great partnership for our local community, and the non-motorized area was initially set aside for noise and dust reduction to our neighbors when the park expanded with the Hudner and Wrens expansion. A large part of the area is also cattle grazed by our VC. It's very, very much a resource-based cattle grazing program for the benefit of the resources. All right, well, now I'm going to pass it off to Akiko, and she is going to talk about our natural resource assessment program.
Okay. So hi, my name is Akiko Mostek. I'm a senior environmental scientist specialist at the Hollister Hills. Next, we are going to present natural resource assessment in the Hollister Hills. Okay, so these natural resource assessment programs show what Hollister Hills has and determines what we are trying to protect. So Hollister Hills has species inventory program through habitat monitoring programs to get baseline of vegetation and wildlife inventories. We utilize this desktop surveys, which is available online data sources such as CNDDB or IPAC or CNPS. So we recently finished the first vegetation classification and mapping program. It's called VegeCamp. We have been monitoring the special status species and habitat. We want to know any invasive species of concerns that we can control and tackle. WHPP was created based on all of natural resource assessments and consideration identifying priorities to protect in next 5 years. And also help us to determine conservation issues to consider and the first step of adaptive management. Next slide, please. This is one of the great example of natural resource assessment of plant communities in Hollister Hills. So this beautiful map was created through vegetation classification and mapping program, VegeCamp. So vegetation at Hollister Hills was sampled and mapped in spring 2021 and 2022. The largest vegetation type was annual perennial grassland of over 1,700 acres, and the second was coast live oak, over 1,400 acres, and the third was chamise sage species of 1,000 acres. The map and acres of each vegetation type will be used as one of the standard baseline, which can be referred to in the future in order to track and predict change over time, including due to fire, land use, or climate change. These data and maps are really valuable tools for natural resource management at the park. Next slide, please. So here are some photos of plant communities captured on the ground level in the Hollister Hills. Top left photo shows annual perennial grassland in a non-monorized, and top right photo shows blue oak and California buckeye and coyote brush in the upper range. Bottom left photo shows California sycamore and coast live oak in the Hartnell Ranch. And the bottom middle photo shows interior live oak and canyon live oak and chamise sage species in lower ranch granite. And the last one is bottom right photo shows blue oak in Range Ranch. So since 1997, Hollister Hill has maintained an extensive habitat monitoring system we call HMS that tracks vegetation, mammals, birds, reptiles, and amphibians across various habitats within the park. So this system utilized the latest protocol on paired plots encompassing a total of 50 study plots, 25 in OHB areas and 25 in non-OHB areas. So the ongoing monitoring through this system provides valuable insights into long-term ecological trends and comparing the impact of OHB and non-OHB activities. It also helps maintain an accurate species inventory and identifies any rare or listed species within the park. So collaboration with outside agencies and university has been essential to these monitoring programs. And since the first general plan for Hollister Hills was created in 1977, we have worked closely with these partners to conduct inventory survey and research. These collaborations ensure that our management plans are grounded in the best available science. Okay, so far we have recorded 116 avian species and 22 reptile species, 27 mammal species, and 8 fish species, and 452 plant species in Hollister Hills. So these are the field photos from our surveys in this year, 2024. So we have completed 2 sets of avian point count surveys, and 2 days of amphibian deepnet surveys, and 4 days of grassland surveys. So on this slide, we like to introduce the native plant nursery program that we have, so which features a greenhouse and shade structures. Each year, the natural resource crews plant thousands of native trees and bushes and flowers and grasses. The plants, all native to the area, are crucial for restoration project or erosion control and beautification. The program is particularly valuable because the seeds used are harvested from within the Hollister Hills, ensuring that propagated plants are well suited to the local environment. So now we are presenting the WHPP goals and objectives. This section is the most important part of the document because we are setting these goals and putting a great effort into them for next 5 years. When we creating our goals and objectives, we are considered various factors, including management units, natural resource assessment, and inventory programs. All of these elements played a crucial role in shaping our goals and objectives. Our primary aim is to conserve and improve habitat, the wildlife habitat for benefit of the wildlife using the best available science. So we also ensure that these goals and objectives are achievable within the context of Hollister Hills. To this end, we follow the SMART framework, goals and objectives that are specific, measurable, and achievable, realistic, and timely. So this approach allows us to effectively monitor progress and ensure that our efforts are both realistic and attainable. And additionally, we consider state and regional conservation objectives, apply them to Hollister Hills where they are appropriate. Okay, so the Hollister Hills has established a total of 7 objectives to achieve over the next 5 years. We like to present one of these objectives as an example, specifically in wildlife category, improving habitat. So the objective is protect California red-eared frog and California tiger salamander breeding habitat from WHPP volunteer trail riding through 2029. And the SMART target is achieve 0 volunteer trail within the ecological buffer of California red-eared frog and or California tiger salamander breeding habitat documented within the last 10 years. So this objective is particularly significant because the park contains breeding pond for both California red-eared frogs and California tiger salamanders. The goal, along with its SMART target, focusing on preventing potential degradation of these breeding habitat by maintaining the protective buffer around the pond. So this buffer safeguards the immediate surrounding habitat, including upland, dispersal habitat, and the overland movement areas. Next slide, please. So this slide provides a little bit of background information on this objective. As part of our annual habitat monitoring program, we closely monitor these 11 water bodies within the park for the presence and breeding status of California red-eared frogs and California tiger salamanders. Over the past 10 years, these ponds have consistently provided high-quality breeding habitat, so that P in this table indicate the presence of these species. The objective ensures that we continue our ongoing efforts to protect these habitats, helping to ensure the long-term health and sustainability of these important species in Hollister Hills. Okay. So we now want to present the management and monitoring actions for this objective. To achieve 0 volunteer trails within the ecological buffer of breeding habitat, we have identified 5 key management actions. So these include the enforcing no night riding, enforcing on-trail riding only, and the seasonally closing selected trail if needed. These practices are already implemented park-wide. The next phase involves installing or repairing exclusion fences to prevent volunteer trail development, and placing interpretive sign for visitor education. These management actions are designed to ensure we meet our objectives of protecting these breeding habitats. To verify the effectiveness of these actions, we have established 2 monitoring programs. The first is the new volunteer trail monitoring program, which will track when, where the size of any new volunteer trails created within the buffer of the breeding habitat. The second program is annual amphibian deepness survey, which will continuously monitor the presence or absence of amphibian species in each habitat. So these 2 are the example project sites. As we talked in the previous slides, these 2 ponds are California red-legged frog breeding habitat in the last 10 years. So these 2 ponds do not have fences to prevent volunteer trail development. So management action will take place. We plan to install the fences around the buffer and putting up the interpreted sign for the public. We are not planning to close any trails. After the installation of the exclusion fences and the signs, we will monitor if any sign of new volunteer trails and continue annual amphibian surveys to know their population dynamics. Okay. So I'm going to give it back to Wes.
All right, thank you very much, Akiko. All right, so back to me to wrap up this presentation. So Akiko just gave us an example of one of the targets and management actions that are contained within the Wildlife Habitat Protection Plan. And as you would imagine, it's only makes sense to have an adaptive circle associated with that. So that's what this graphic is showing. That in general, we will start with our management actions, then we will evaluate our management actions through monitoring, and then adapt based on that monitoring. And each year we will consider the monitoring findings and may need to, change the objectives or goals based on those findings. And then we'll use that information to inform our resource assessments so that we can further reform and adapt our goals and objectives. And we will always apply the best available science, which is evolving, ever evolving. So start of my career, things were thought of differently than they are today. Just like in a 10-year cycle from now, we'll probably be doing something. So it's very much baked into our thought process and planning that we will continue to change as we learn. Our anticipated update cycles is that every year we will have an annual report, which is just a summary of all of the previous year's monitorings and findings so that we can record them and make it publicly available. And we have every intention to make this a living document, so it will be consistently updated, like I said, with the best available science. And every 5 years, we will have an official update where we will go through a more formal process of incorporating the changes that we've made based on what we've learned. And then the next steps is that we are currently in our public comment period starting today. So it is a 30-day public comment period, and that we are asking anyone to send comments to the email listed below. It's also included in the invite link that we sent out. And yeah, like I said, thank you very much for listening to our presentation, and we are very excited to get going on everything that we've worked on and put into this wildlife protection plan. It's been many years coming. I've been working on it continuously for over 10 years, and it's finally finalized in the document. So I really want to thank Akiko. She put the last couple years into this and really pushed us over the finish line. So yeah, we couldn't have done it without her. And with that, I'll give the presentation back to Scott to close this out.
Thank you, Wes. Thank you, Akiko. That was a phenomenal presentation. I really appreciate you guys doing that. And so now we can turn the presentation over to the public. If there are any questions about the document, we'd love to hear from the public now. So again, we anticipate this to be more of a time to ask questions about it. You know, how was the plan developed or something of that nature. We can respond accordingly. If you have comments on the document that you've read so far, we can take them, but we're probably not going to respond necessarily. And then Shane, are we taking comments verbally, or are we having people type them into chat?
We can try it out again. We had some issues last time, and I say we try it, and then if people have issues with turning on their mics and verbalizing their comments, that we have people type them out. If you do have a comment, the best way to get our attention to let us know to unmute your mic is by using the raise hand feature in the middle top. And perfect. I see Amy Granite has a question. So Amy, I will unmute you and we'll try this and see how it works out. All right, Amy, you should be able to unmute yourself.
I think it's working.
Yes,
it is. Perfect.
Hey, Scott. Hey, everyone. Great presentation. No one knows better what went into the environmental requirements in SB 249 than I did, because I kind of was there. But the one question I had then, which is the same question I have now, first I wanted to know, this is going back to 2017, can our environmental scientists achieve these goals? And I was told yes. And my second question is, can they achieve the goals without closing trails or significantly affecting the enjoyment of our SVRA, because that's why it was created in the first place. So it seems to me, and just what I've heard in this presentation, that closure isn't a factor in any of these, although there will be temporary closures. But I was curious about the management actions. So the management actions, Kiko said 3 of them, that I believe the night riding, no volunteer trails, which is the best way I've ever heard of unauthorized trail use described. But can you elaborate a little bit into those management actions, as in what differences can people expect to see because of this? And, you know, if there are temporary trail closures of a trail, how long will those closures be for? You know, a little bit more elaboration, I think, will help people feel more comfortable with some of these actions. And just the last comment, we've seen the effects at Carnegie, and they're wonderful. I mean, it's just seeing it in spring, especially. There's been very, very little off-trail use, really nice looking trails there. And I know Hollister Hills can achieve the same thing. So I'm looking forward to visiting soon. So if you can just elaborate on the management actions, that would be great.
Thank you, Amy. Wes?
You want me to take that?
Yeah,
thanks, Amy. In general, you know, like a lot of what is built into this wildlife habitat protection plan is actions that the environmental scientists and the rangers and the staff have been doing for decades, and it's you know, just kind of formalizing a lot of the preventative work. You know, Hollister Hills is a trails only park. We all know that there are more bonus trails out there, unauthorized ones, and this is, you know, we're basically highlighting the most sensitive areas in the whole parks. You know, it's 6,600 acres. There's a few of those acres are really key to breeding endangered species. So by protecting those few acres, it just creates the, you know, an environment where you know, these species can persist. And so it's kind of a lot of the ponds and water bodies where the breeding amphibians are located there's never been authorized recreation in those areas. It's always been unauthorized, but there hasn't always been formal fencing preventing it. So that's kind of what we've always had like plans. We've known that this is critical habitat. We need to protect these, few key spots of all the park. So it's about that. We're not even in the maps that Akiko showed. There are no trails that are going to be closed as a result of that. It's really just fencing off areas that people shouldn't be riding in anyways. So hopefully that kind of answers your question. And I wouldn't anticipate any dramatic changes than what we've seen already. There's some great examples like in the Wrens and Hudner when those trail systems were laid out. It's kind of our famous example. It's called Tiger Trail after a tiger salamander breeding pond is located within the buffer area of that trail. So every winter we close that trail seasonally for a few months because the tiger salamanders, it's just within their breeding habitat. So we actually have a bigger buffer around that one, but it was built into the environmental document when that trail was developed. So it's been our management action to close that trail during their breeding season. So that's kind of an example of what we're hoping to do more of with this protection plan, and we've really spent a lot of time over the last 10 years in red-legged frog and tiger salamanders. So we know where they breed. We know where their most critical ponds are that we need to protect. Gee, I think Amy's got a question that she
Yeah,
typed
Shane,
in.
can you unmute Amy again?
She should be able to unmute herself. I haven't disabled it.
Yeah, I'm here. So I didn't want to take up all the time, but there's always a
you're
question
fine.
about carrying capacity and how much that influences the amount of people in there. Have there been any analyses about, because Hollister Hills can get really, really busy, especially in the lower ranch, but also I guess in the upper ranch too, come to think of it.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been any analysis done between amounts of people and what is the carrying capacity in the park, and will that change or will that be adapted as needed, or is it needed?
Well, Hollister already has an effective carrying capacity. It was set aside the same time when the buffer areas of Hollister Hills were set aside when the park got sued by its neighbors. One of the settlement agreement initiatives in that was to not add any new day use or camping facilities because we don't count how many people come in the door. There's a set area where you can set up in the day use and in the campgrounds. So that, and once all those areas are full, we shut the park down from taking on new people. So that's the way that we control how many people visit the park. So as part of that settlement agreement, we weren't able to build any new campgrounds or day use. So we've had that same limiting factor for the last over 20 years. And so in order for that to change, is we would need to do a general plan process and get that any new areas built into the plan and have that, publicly reviewed. So we do have a carrying capacity in terms of that, and we only hit that, in kind of holiday weekends for the most part, and it rarely comes into play. But when the weather aligns and it rained and it's warm and it's red sticker season, which is not going to be the case anymore, but we've had those times where we have hit capacity, especially holiday weekends. But that's really just a few weekends out of the whole year.
Thanks, Wes. And thank you, Amy. Thanks for the questions. Anyone else? I know we don't have a whole lot of people here, but if anyone else has any questions, we could answer.
I currently don't see anybody, Scott, but we can always refer them back to, like, this is the start of the public review period, so referring them back to that email if questions do arise as they look
Yep.
through the whip and
Yep.
whatnot.
Yep, absolutely. Just so everyone on the call again, for posterity's sake, when we post this online, you can submit your comments written in email to ohmvr.envcomp@parks.ca.gov. It should be there on the chat as well. And we will be documenting those comments and responding internally to those, and choosing and seeing whether or not they will be incorporated into the document. So seeing that there are no more comments, I think we can go ahead and end the presentation now, unless, Wes, you had anything else to say, any closing remarks?
No, I think we covered it. Yeah, I really appreciate everyone coming out, and yeah, always welcome any comments. Feel free to reach out to myself directly or through OHP division. And, we are always welcoming what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. So feel free to let us know.
Awesome. Thank you, Wes. Thank you, Akiko, and thank you for the division team for helping make the meeting happen. Cheers to everyone for coming. Thank you very much. And yeah, please review the document and let us know what you think about it through our comments. That'll conclude our meeting. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening.
I just wanted to let people know too, if you missed, I saw a few people come in halfway through. We are posting this to YouTube. There will be a link posted on our website where you can check out the beginning of the presentation as well. So,
yeah, thank you. All right, thanks everybody.